Welcome to IGNITX Showcases. So we'll be starting the last showcase of season 2, featuring my dear friend Xuan Ming Ng. Ming, as you know, is from Singapore, but currently lives in Norway. We are looking forward to a nice chat this afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rosie Pili. Italian name, but of course I am originally from the land of Brexit. I'm based in the Tyrol in Austria and have shockingly been working for something like 30 years in the international sports events. Firstly, working with the IAAF, now known as World Athletics, where I headed the event organization department, before moving to Innsbruck to head the international client services for the first Winter Youth Olympic Games. It was here that I first worked with Neo, Ilva and Ming from the IGNITX team. After the YOG, because of my love of winter sport, I founded my own company, Markbach International, here in the Tyrol. And I've worked on a multitude of projects, such as the IAAF World Championships in Moscow. We went to the AOF in Vorarlberg, Liechtenstein. And I'm also a partner of the Golden Fly series since 2012, which is the world's first in-city athletics event, which takes place on the biggest mobile athletics facility. When we're currently planning to head to Asia, to Thailand, in fact, probably next spring. Obviously, COVID is going to play an important part in the choice of the date. So a short introduction to my friend Xuan Ming, a friend and colleague of multiple talents. Ming and I first met in Belgrade, in 2010, when I just started to work for the Innsbruck Youth Olympic Games. Ming had written to me to ask me for a job, and at the time, being a very small budget event, I didn't know how I was going to have any staff at all. Anyway, things changed and we managed to get Ming on board, and there I was sitting in Belgrade, and suddenly somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hello, I'm Xuan Ming." And that was it. We became friends and she came to work with me. She was my rock in the organising committee at Innsbruck. She supported the NOC team in a fabulous way. So, of course, everybody knows her as a passionate sports administrator and a lover of her work with the NOCs. So, hello, Ming. Come and join me, dear. How are you today?
Hi, Mama Rosie.
Yeah, great. If you call me Mama Rosie, I'm going to call you Mini Ming. You know that.
Yes.
So, tell us all. We're dying to know. Has it snowed yet in Norway?
No, not yet. Well, at least not where I live. It might have snowed further up north. I'm not too sure. But it is reasonably cold right now. Well, for me, coming from a tropical land, and I have my hot water bottle here with me, keeping warm.
And do you have a cup of tea too? Or do you have aquavit, maybe?
No, none of that. It's a bit too early for all of that.
But you're enjoying life. You're enjoying life. Where do you live exactly? Outside Oslo, somewhere in the mountains?
It's all within Oslo. Yeah.
Within Oslo. Okay.
Officially, yes.
I've never been to Norway. You know, it's strange. So one day I will come and visit you. I promise.
Oh, please do.
Anyway. Oh, hello. So, oh gosh, how do I pronounce? I'll just say Danielle because I don't know how to XYH. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Oh, Gustavo's here. Guru's here. Hi, everybody. Okay. Hi, so for my first question, I would like to ask Ming a bit about her studies, because obviously Ming is not the issue of a sports administration background. In fact, she studied fine arts, and I know she is an excellent artist. Tell us a bit about that, and what sort of art do you like, and why?
Wow. So speaking maybe as a spectator or someone just standing by enjoying the artwork, that one's a bit difficult. I really adore most forms of art. So I love performance arts, whether it be dance or classical music or theater. I really love the visual arts, painting and drawing and pottery, functional art, literature, poetry, which I also sort of subsume into that whole family of art. But as an artist making art, I primarily am a painter and a draftsman. I work principally in oil paints, watercolor, especially for scientific or botanical illustration, pencils, charcoal, silver point, pen and ink. I've recently also been exploring this combination between traditional mediums and digital, working digitally on a tablet. It allows me to be a lot more free and less precious in the process of making art. But what I found out and enjoyed, as have many artists before me and much wiser artists before me, that working in different areas of art will inform the fields that you work principally in. So if you work digitally, it will inform your non-digital art. If you paint, it informs your drawing. If you sculpt, it informs your painting, for example. Pretty much in the same way that different experiences, focus, and activities will in our lives influence and inform the way we come to other things, we come to our experiences and how we respond and appreciate them.
Yes, well, it's certainly very varied. I know you're also not bad at creative writing. I've read a number of things that you've posted on Facebook in the past. Very imaginative. You have a dark side, maybe a rather shy side in there. Do you find that you kind of split your personality when you write?
I do take quite a bit of liberties when I write, just mostly not necessarily to address a thing too directly, but the shy side of me is something, I think that's more of my standard or my default mode. The whole interacting with people easily is something that is more learned. So my default is being shy.
So you mentioned your interest in nature, and that was how you express yourself with your watercolors. I remember some fantastic drawings of tulips that you did, watercolor, and they were, I mean, it was like a photo for me because I'm such a lousy drawer myself. I mean, I'm a stick man drawer, but that sort of links to your interest in the great outdoors and the wilderness, because your studies weren't just in fine arts, because somewhere you got involved in chasing bears in Canada and being interested in wilderness emergency medicine. Tell us a bit about that, and how come you decided to head into that area?
Well, about chasing bears, I think I mostly
tell us about the chasing bears. I remember you telling me about hanging your food in a tree so that bears couldn't eat it.
Well, I think I mostly tried to avoid the bears and any other charismatic megafauna, as I enjoy calling them. So lions, bears, well, mountain lions. And I'm very happy if they live and let me live. But it is true that I do spend as much time as I can being in the wilderness, hiking, mountaineering, sometimes sea kayaking, ski touring, mostly lying face down or face up in the lichen or the moss and the rocks.
Yeah. No, I take it you've seen some reindeer in Norway.
Yes.
Any polar bears? Polar bears?
No.
No, not yet.
I haven't gone that far north, and I think you need to be incredibly prepared to go up north. with my qualifications and my skills, I would not be comfortable going up north alone. And I do love I do love spending time alone in the wilderness. So it was actually my love for the wilderness and my preference for solo expeditions and also that simultaneously this desire to be a responsible user of the wilderness that drove me to learn wilderness medicine. And then of course there was my incredible admiration for the National Outdoor Leadership School and their instructors, who are absolutely phenomenal. But yes, I have many strange and silly stories from my adventures in the wilderness that we can probably talk about over a campfire.
Please share with us a funny story. You've got to have one or two
that
you can repeat, that is.
That's a good one. That's true. Well, I do have one. So Pedro actually commented on the comment section. He was my first mountaineering instructor, and one of those phenomenal NOLS instructors. And it was during our mountaineering expedition. So pretty much everyone on the team, there were 3 of us girls, and then everyone else were guys. And all the gentlemen were at least a head and a half taller than me. And this makes it somewhat challenging when you're on a rope team together mountaineering and when you do your practice falls, because you need to self-arrest and try to stop your team from sliding into a crevasse and to certain doom, or not certain doom, but at least you need to stop falls. So we would practice the self-arrest moves and while being on a rope team in a safe environment, of course. And I remember that when so they paired me up with someone who was closer to my size, but still much bigger than me. And so he runs off in the opposite direction very fast to simulate that falling. And I get yanked backwards and I start desperately trying to arrest the fall. And it takes 5 meters before I'm finally able to stop the fall. So that was both terrifying and exciting and fun at the same time.
So is that a bit like being dragged behind a galloping horse?
Pretty much. He was very strong. But there are also other silly things like waking up frozen to the side of the tent. Your sleeping bag is basically frozen solid to the side of your tent. Or colleagues who wake up in the middle of the night and sit up in the tent shouting something about cake and then falling right back asleep again. And nobody has any idea what was going on. But yes.
So what areas do these studies, these medical studies, what do you actually learn? I mean, what are the core subjects then?
Well, wilderness medicine is medicine as it is practiced in the wilderness context. So there are, within this gestalt of time and the environment as it influences how we respond to our patient and how we care for our patient and how it actually can injure our patient or make things worse for our patient, as well as the need for improvisation because we might not be able to have all of our equipment with us. That and also communication and decision making are much changed or very different out in the wilderness or austere environments. Either we don't have so much opportunity for communicating with the outside world and getting help. So for example, if there's a case of poisoning, whether someone has eaten something wrong or chemicals that you might be concerned about in the wilderness, you can't exactly easily call out to poison control, not always, for example. Decision making is also something that's a huge part of what we do and a huge and really something that we emphasize very, very strongly is prevention, because we know that it is easier to stay warm, to maintain your warmth than to warm someone up who is hypothermic. Warming up someone who's severely hypothermic is actually quite a terrifying thing, especially when you might not be able to get them out.
Yeah, so that might involve you climbing into somebody else's sleeping bag to keep them alive, basically.
That's not necessarily the most effective way to warm a person up. There are other better ways to warm them up. And if someone is severely hypothermic, we really want to avoid jostling them because the heart is in a very fragile state at that time. You might actually cause them to, you might actually cause the heart to go into, to stop or to go into a rhythm that is not, well, for want of a better word, not ideal. It could kill them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got you. We've got a question from Mary Ng. What's your longest number of days without a shower in the wild? Do you always work in pairs? As you're so petite, how is it possible for you to evacuate an injured person? Did you learn about wild herbs?
That's a really interesting one. Wild herbs is not really a part of our of what we study. That's probably a different field of study if you're interested in that. But it's not something that we study about, except maybe in terms of possible poisoning that might occur to a patient. But the longest number of days without a shower. How would I put this?
Own up, Ming.
Well, okay, with an actual shower, so with a shower head and the proper facilities, then that would be a month. But then during the month of being in the wilderness, we definitely have to maintain very good standards of hygiene. The risks that you run by not maintaining good standards of hygiene out in the wilderness. So the whole point on prevention, isn't it? So it's important to maybe get some Nalgene's of water perhaps, and then clean yourself to prevent salt rashes, for example, to prevent certain infections, for example, as well. So even though we might not have a traditional shower in the sense, there are opportunities such as going to the river safely, of course, because water and potential drownings or potential emergencies around water are also quite concerning. Yeah, but we always do our best to, well, we enforce good hygiene practices. It's very important. Working in pairs, the teams out who do search and rescue usually don't necessarily work alone, or at least the ones that I have been in contact with. If I happen to run into a patient, which I have in the wilderness when I'm on my own, then it's a question of decision making and trying to get into communication to get help to evacuate a person. In certain cases, it is possible to evacuate a patient by myself if the patient is able to walk and is not, say, for example, even if it's a leg injury. If it's something that is usable, then I might brace it and then assist the patient on walking out. But then if it's something much more serious, then I would need to try to find some way to get more help or see if there is a nearby ranger's hut, for example, where I could access further assistance. Yeah.
Okay. So really, you're a kind of MacGyver in the wild.
Sometimes that would be the case because we pretty much the tools that we have are pretty much what we have in our bags, or if you don't have a bag, then what you have on you or on your patient. So sometimes you might need to use equipment that are not traditionally used for certain injuries, for treating certain injuries. So for example, if you need to create a sling and a swath, you could use their jacket and create a improvised sling and swath. You could improvise many other things, braces and splints, for example, can be improvised as well.
Good. Now,
but of course, these things follow. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, carry on. Finish.
I guess the thing was just that so long as we follow the principles of, for example, if we're making a splint, the principles of a good splint or the principle of a good brace, then yeah.
Okay. Now, you recently had an experience volunteering in a refugee camp. Did the skills that you acquired in this medical course, were they very useful to you there, or was it a totally different kettle of fish? Can you tell us, share a few stories of this experience, because I'm sure people are interested. It's been so full in the media over the last year until COVID hit, how many refugees there are in Europe and how people are handling them. I'm sure there's some interest from outside and people would like to hear about that.
Absolutely. I was and I am very grateful to have been given that opportunity to serve at those 2 different refugee camps recently. And definitely, I think wilderness medicine is absolutely applicable in these cases. It's really, in the one refugee camp, it was a very austere environment. It takes hours to walk from within the camp out to the nearest hospital. And hours is really not an exaggeration. You could be walking for an entire day before you can reach the nearest hospital. And that's if you can walk, and not all of our patients can walk. So that's a concern as well. And of course, you don't always have the equipment that you need in these environments. We rely a lot on donated equipment. We sometimes rely on, and also, for example, in Africa, where one of the camps was, the situation, the context there is such that you don't have necessarily a doctor out in the clinics within the different zones in the refugee camp, but you might have a nurse, you might have something similar to a physician's assistant out in those clinics, and they work very independently. And so all the things that I mentioned before, decision-making, the difficulties in communication, needing to improvise, the environment adding to the conditions or exacerbating perhaps the conditions of our patients, the time that we spend with our patient, the prolonged time with our patient, all of these things come into the picture. So absolutely, wilderness medicine is practiced out in these areas. But as for stories, there are many. In Africa, I was allowed to assist at the delivery of a child, which was both absolutely terrifying and incredible, and just absolutely phenomenal. And I was told to receive the child. So yay. I remember that as I received the baby in my hands and we put the baby on the mother's chest, they told me, okay, now clamp now you need to clamp the cord. And my heart rate is actually going up right now thinking about it. So I clamped the cord and they said, here's the scalpel, now cut the cord. And I thought,
who, me?
Cut the cord, really? What? So I cut the cord, and then I think the next half an hour was an absolute haze. Standing by the station, I was listening to my colleague basically going through the APGAR scale to make sure that the child is in good condition, or if we need to do certain interventions. And then I stood by the station, and I do not know the name of this thing, because I generally don't work with pediatrics, and this is beyond my knowledge. The thing that keeps a child warm, like an incubator of sorts.
Incubator, yeah.
It's an incubator. Okay, great. Absolutely. So the child was in the incubator, and I was standing there staring at this child, and all I remember is humming all the songs from my childhood that my mom used to sing to me at the child, and that it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But on the other side of things, at the most recent experience, there was the phenomenal difficulty in realizing that at the end of the day, when we work at camps like this, we are able to return to our own living quarters, wherever they are. We are able to turn on the tap for water as and when we want. We can take a shower. We have hot water easily. We can lock the door, and we can go to sleep within reasonable safety. And access to healthcare, access to running water for those staying in these refugee camps is not a given. And even given access to healthcare, resources are limited. And in the most recent camp, stab wounds, for example, were a regular occurrence. And then, of course, you have the stress and the circumstances, as well as insufficient nutritional profile of the food that they are provided, and the trauma that many of them carried and were basically also experiencing as a result of being in these camps, were basically a ripe ground for further injury and illness. And infections that, for wounds, small wounds, in fact, that we would really shrug off, are a huge concern there. We would see lots of wounds that are normally very easily treated or should not have become infected, becoming terribly infected and then becoming systemic as well. So that was something very, very humbling, I think.
Just to give people an idea, because the camps you're talking about, they sound absolutely enormous. So how many people were there in each of these camps? I mean, I think we can't quite imagine how many thousands of people were gathered in this one location. So what area did they have, and how many facilities, how many water points did they have for how many people? I think those are some of the basic challenges just on basic hygiene, right?
Right. And you make a really good point there on basic hygiene. What with COVID-19 being a huge concern and all of us talking about washing our hands, running water is not a given in the camp, the most recent one. So that camp most recently was, I think, maximum meant for about 3,500 people. And there are definitely more than, if I'm not mistaken, 15,000 people there now. So we are more than 4 times the capacity in that camp, which means distancing is a problem as well. As for how many people to a single tap, I'm not really sure, but I know that the numbers are up in hundreds sometimes for queuing for a tap. Queuing is a standard part of their lives. They queue for food, they queue for medicine, they queue for paperwork to be done, they queue for everything, they queue to go to the toilet as well. So that's
this must be just a nightmare for any person to come to such a location and be living in these conditions, when, I mean, they're like you or me, they've come from their home and they've run away because of the situation and they end up there. It must be absolutely traumatizing.
It is, and it's also difficult because I know so many of the locals have been incredibly supportive as well and very compassionate. And it's a massive job. Logistically, it's insane to think about how to manage any of this logistically. But of course, what I saw was only the tip of the iceberg. With the skill set that I have, it's very limited. Whereas we have doctors and nurses in the field and in the teams who see much more than I do. And if there's anyone interested, you can read all about it on the internet. There are lots of articles written by doctors and nurses who have worked many, many more months than I have at the camp. Some of them have been there for 6 months, a year. So they have seen much more, and they also have been exposed to much more of the fluctuations and the changes that happen. And in fact, our worst fears have been realized recently. Was it 5 days ago, perhaps? The first patient within the camp was confirmed to have COVID-19. So the implications of this are massive.
Yeah, a sad situation. But let's move on to one of your other talents now, Ming, because I have had personal experience of your highly delicious Black Forest gâteau. I know you are a passionate cook, be it of Asian dishes or more European cake. Tell us about your favorite things to cook. What do you like to cook?
Goodness, I think I really enjoy cooking the most when I cook for friends and for family, because it is something that brings us together. We all at some point will need to eat. So I think that's one of my most enjoyed activities, especially when working for the games and and you meet new people in the team. And NOC Relations and Services, as you know, is usually quite an international team. So sharing the foods from our different parts of the world is really fun. And I really enjoy cooking things from my part of the world, from Southeast Asia, so that we can showcase that flavor and that profile to everyone else, and hopefully distract us all from that work talk. But we know that embargo on work talks, maybe it lasts for 10 minutes and then everyone goes back to talking about work.
I certainly know that in our team with Neo, we had many interesting Asian meals.
Oh, we did. We absolutely did.
And I'm lucky that Neo and I both have a taste for spicy Asian cookery. So we certainly had lots of that during our time in Innsbruck. And we were lucky. We're lucky enough to have Noi, who was just around the corner. So it was great. Super.
Absolutely. In fact, Rosie, I think you eat much more spicy food than I do.
Well, no, it's a taste I developed quite young because my father loved Asian food, and we would battle for Thai curry or Indian curry and see who could eat the spiciest, even during my teen years. So I've always loved that.
Wow.
So cool. But I know you've cooked some delicious soup for me. When I wasn't well, you cooked cake for my birthday. I'm sure you did something when we all had Christmas together. So no, lovely. But let's talk a bit about sport, because Ming's wide-ranging skills also include her talents as a sportswoman. Singapore, very famous for its sailing talent, of course, and Ming is an accomplished sailor. But she's also a sprinter and a speed skater. So, Ming, how did you end up doing speed skating?
Rosie, firstly, you're too kind. I do not think I'm accomplished in these sports at all. And I've been told many times by my coaches, in fact, that my temperament is not very suited for these different competitions. You need to be pretty aggressive at the start line for sailing, and before the horn is sounded for the start, you need to be going at full speed, so that once the horn is started, you've crossed the start line at full speed already and are on your way to the first buoy. But my tendency is to be incredibly apologetic, and it's pretty much me going, "Oh, excuse me, I beg your pardon, I'm so sorry." At the start line, which really doesn't work.
It's not part of your pastime to be chasing boys, then. Boom, boom.
Rosie, what?
Boys, B-O-Y-S, not B-U-O-Y-S. No, it was just a silly joke.
Oh dear, Rosie.
Come on, speed skating. I want to know about speed skating.
Well, I'd always wanted, it was sort of a crazy dream in my head to somehow one day be competent enough to represent Singapore in a winter sport. And as much as I enjoy downhill skiing, I'm not someone who enjoys the prospect of getting injured in a high-speed situation. So to put it very mildly, of course, because we know the kind of injuries that athletes in these fields have, and the phenomenal skill that they have. But I was hoping to be maybe a cross-country skier. And so we reached out to our friends in Norway to ask about the possibility of me becoming a cross-country skier. And initially not realizing how old I was, they were incredibly enthusiastic. And then they found out how old I was, and they said, "Well, you might want to reconsider." And they were very honest with me about it, because to build enough competence and it takes a certain amount of time, and even then then the question of, are you even able to compete at that level, is another question. So if you're willing to take that risk, and you won't be sad at the end of all this time that you were not able to compete, even though you've done your best, then it's a risk worth taking, perhaps, or perhaps not. So I was really blue about it. And then someone said to us, well, Ming, you are Asian and you're very short. Why don't you try short track speed skating?
Excellent.
And so I was fortunate to be given a chance to try skating, and I fell in love with it. The absolute freedom of it, the sensation of it. And you know how it is with any sport, the whole discipline, and to mix a few of the sensations together, to mix a few of our senses together, the emotion of that movement is, for want of a better word, really delicious. The way it feels in your body. Do you know what I'm saying? It's so hard to put into words. It's sort of a complete, your entire being is sucked into that sensation of, I finally gotten that particular move correct. And even though it's maybe the first time in 100 tries, it is a phenomenal experience. But it was also, the whole journey in short track speed skating was also a humbling one. It was very ego crushing because I had started so late. So of course I was training with little kids who were either 3 times younger than or as young as I was. So with running, my coach would say, okay, Ming, you lead the pack for the running activities because you run faster, you're taller than them, and you have a bigger stride than them. So you will push them to go faster. And then on the ice, it was the other way around. I was at the back of the pack trying to catch up with these kids. And there was one day, in fact, that I did very badly during one of our relay rallies. And I was really depressed, and I'd come back into the center out of the way of the skaters who were still doing the relay. And I looked absolutely blue, and one of the little kids came over to me and patted me on the arm and said, "It's okay, Ming." And in that moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. And there you go.
Lovely. So, but that doesn't tell us how you ended up working in the Olympics.
No.
Neo is very keen for you to tell us why you joined the Singapore 2010 YOG Organising Committee. So maybe you can say something about that and how your love for NOCs developed, because if I remember correctly, I think you wanted to be more working in logistics at the outset. Is that right?
That's correct. And that comes from the shy part. So I was living in Chicago at the time and was working towards a dream job of working in the mountains and sort of in the summer and maybe doing work in art in the rest of the year. But then there was the economic crisis. And so, of course, the job market fell through and there was no reason to hire a foreigner if you could, of course, hire someone who is young and passionate from the local population. So there was that. And around the same time, I had heard that Singapore had won the bid to host Singapore 2010. And I thought, I love sport and I love my country. And if I can, I would like to serve my country. I've gotten so much from my country. So if there's some way that I can give back somehow, I would love to. So that was one of the jobs I applied for. And I had, as you said, wanted to work more in the logistics or in a field that had less relations work, mostly because I was shy and I was really nervous around people. And in fact, the whole medicine thing, right? When I was younger, someone had asked me, "Oh, why don't you become a doctor?" And I said, "No, I don't really want to be a doctor because you have to deal with people." So it was the same thing. I didn't really want to deal with people, but as fate perhaps would have it, I was blessed with the opportunity to work with the NOC relations team. And my goodness, it's a little emotional thinking about it, in fact. Learning from the people around me, having good mentors and friends around me who were very supportive, and also being, I guess, being given the freedom to interact with the NOCs the way that I felt was right in a sense. So, you know, whether it's the romantic in me believed in this sense of family and community, and that this, of course, extended to my NOCs, naturally.
Naturally.
Absolutely.
Well, we both love NOCs, so you see, that's our sort of, that was our point in common. And I mean, you were lucky enough then to go from Singapore straight on to working in the mountains of Innsbruck. So
absolutely,
that absolutely pushed you in the direction you wanted to go.
Yes. So exactly. And it was fun because it was sort of a journey together with this family, wasn't it? So from sending photos of rainbows and of Singapore and hoping that people would fall in love with my country the way I loved it, to going to Innsbruck and sharing with my colleagues, oh, Innsbruck is amazing. This is what I saw. This is the Innsbruck that I'm living right now, as a part of that relations work. We call it work, but it didn't really feel like work because it was basically communicating with friends.
Absolutely. I agree. And I mean, going to work each day was an absolute pleasure. We had fun every single day. It didn't feel like we were working 12 hours in the office. We were just hanging out with friends, doing stuff that we like to do, talking to people we know.
Exactly. And a lot of there is a lot of humor, I think, in organizing committees. Well, at least I've been fortunate that the teams that I've been in have always had a phenomenal sense of humor. So we'd sit around and laugh and joke all day, even though things, and especially when things got more challenging, we would laugh and joke together even more. So that was a beautiful part of it all. But it didn't come naturally, of course. I remember having to start off by taking notes in a notebook about phrases and talking points. So I would listen to the senior members of my team interacting with the NOCs, or to my colleagues in the team interacting with their NOCs, and I would listen to the phrases that they use, the questions that they asked. And so I started off by taking down notes in my notebook as to what I could say, how I could say it. And so it didn't come naturally at all. It was very painfully learned, and sometimes very awkward, not only for me, but for my poor NOCs. But I think they were very warm-hearted and very open to all of this, which I've been very, very grateful for.
Though I think we should point out to the audience that there were moments when there was a little more stress. Let's not forget the DRPs.
Yes.
Yeah, and the hard work with the whole team supporting us, getting everybody through there, handling the sports entries with Neo. I mean, it was challenging. It was challenging because it was the first time for the winter yog. So I think it was a hugely satisfying experience. Wouldn't you agree? I would recommend this to somebody wanting to work in sport. What's a great experience. Definitely working with NOCs. Yeah.
Yes. And also, I think in youth games especially, we have the service levels are very different from the Olympics and the Paralympics. However, in the Youth Olympic Games, because our resources are very different, so each person ends up taking on a wider scope of responsibilities in that sense, or at least so far that's been the experience. That we each take on a wider scope of responsibilities, we see a lot more, and the challenges that we face need to be addressed in slightly more creative ways when you don't necessarily have the resources to pour onto resolving certain problems. So I think that was a huge fascination in it as well, just sitting down together and working through these things. And I remember sitting with you and with Ilva, and we were talking about, okay, well, can we do it this way? And well, we've done it this way before, but why can't we do it this way? So there was a lot of
I think that you have to become polyvalent. The less money you have available, the more polyvalent you have to become in order to fit everything in the budget.
But it's also a question of so this whole resource management was also I guess, also brought to the forefront, how can we be sustainable, but not only sustainable in terms of resources or having a green, a smaller carbon footprint, right? But resource management in terms of manpower management, I guess, making sure that we don't burn people out when we have so little manpower in the first place. And I guess then solutions such as transference of the delegation registration process into an electronic one, for example, and then shifting. And I think that's a very powerful thing. So in 2010 in Singapore, we were still using a lot of paper. So a lot of the work was being done very separately with our NOCs. In that, so we'd receive paper and then we'd need to do a lot of work on the paper. So things had to be kept very separate. Whereas when you shift into an electronic mode, then you're actually able to empower our clients a lot more. And of course, you know this, so I'll be preaching to the choir actually. But for our friends in the audience, we were able to empower our clients a lot more. And then, of course, this changed and continued to improve with the Youth Olympic Games. So in Lillehammer, we improved that even further by empowering our clients to take action as well. Instead of a very controlled process, what we ended up having was a very cooperative process. And we've always known that our friends in the NOCs who go from games to games to games have a phenomenal amount of knowledge and experience that we from the organizing committee can learn from as well. So shifting from a more controlled interaction with our NOCs to a more cooperative one, of course, is something very healthy, I think, for the sports event management environment as well. There's a lot of learning to be done. There's a lot of improvement that can happen as a result of this, hearing their opinions. And then, of course, we don't always succeed in delivering what we know would be ideal for our clients and for ourselves as well. But then it's a move, isn't it? It's a shift towards that.
Yeah. Well, Neo just made a comment reminding us about the chef de mission seminar and the presentation that you made, which was very, very amusing, I have to say, as you made your electronic DRP.
I remember, and Neo, of course, is so energetic, right? I think all of us who know Neo love her energy. And I remember that suddenly on the screen, there was the part where you had to fill in the details. And so I think she was filling my details in as an athlete, and suddenly there was height and weight there. And I thought, what? We never discussed this. What's going on, Neo? So, yes, lots of good times.
Yeah. So how about some quick questions? Okay. You can give one word answer or a little bit more if you need to. Which of all was your favorite Olympics? Or Youth Olympics?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
I can't choose. Oh, dear. Help. Help.
Well, I mean, obviously you have a wonderful feeling for your home Olympics because that was your first one. I mean, for me, my first Olympics was Atlanta 96. So I always have this great feeling, this first memory of seeing Michael Johnson win the 400 meters in his gold shoes. I mean, that's stuck in my mind like this. I can see that like yesterday, even though it's a very long time ago. But then there's, you know, there is always something or somebody, a relationship that you build working in a certain context, and you think, gosh, that was really a fabulous team. I worked with Melina in Athens in 2004. I don't know if she's watching us today. If you're out there, hi Mel. And that was a fabulous experience for us, dealing with all the athletes. I was still at IAAF. We were working on how all of the qualification deadlines, trying to get everybody, all the athletes into the qualification system, which was hugely challenging because it was still paper, but it was an amazing experience. So, I mean, those were my two favorite games. You must have the same feeling, no?
That helps me, actually. It's true. I do have a very strong bias for, of course, my first Olympics, which was the one in Singapore 2010 Youth Olympic Games, just because it was at home as well, which is phenomenal. To be able to do a games in your own home country is a feeling like no other. The amount of pride and the magic that comes with it. In fact, right after the Singapore 2010 Games, I went back to McRitchie Reservoir, which is where I used to run. There's a good, was it 11.4 km route that is that lots of students and people like to run or walk. And Singaporeans are not exactly the most I would say that we're rather shy people, perhaps. It's not, we don't behave the same way. For example, when we were in Innsbruck and we went hiking, you would say hello to everyone, grüß Gott to everyone on the trail. But in Singapore, that's not really common. But right after the games, practically everyone I met was saying hello, and I could not think of any other reason or any other event happening in Singapore that could have changed the energy so much within the context that I was in. So that was a huge thing. But I do think that I have a very soft spot as well for the Lillehammer 2016 Games. It was a time that I guess with some experience behind me, I was able to work with a lot more confidence. And also with the phenomenal team that we had, but we've always had phenomenal teams, so that's a bit hard to say as well. But with the phenomenal team that we had, working with Ilva and Nyo again, working with Guro, who is someone I truly admire. I really, if I could be one day a boss like her, that would be amazing. Just even half of how she was as a boss. And then, of course, there was Norway. Norway is and the sense of humor in Norway is really, it's really great. Or maybe it was just the organizing committee, but I think the people here in Norway have a great sense of humor. And then the mountains here. How could you not fall in love with the mountains here? But Neo and I were chatting about this recently, a few years ago, and we spoke about how Innsbruck was also similar in that sense. I had the chance to work with you. I had the chance to see the mountains in Tyrol, which are astonishing as well. Yeah.
So we're talking much too much. We're going to be running out of time in not long. So maybe you want to tell us in your wind up. We're coming to the end of the second season. Ming, what's coming up next? What's happening with IGNITE? Say a few words about what direction we're going in, what's going to happen next.
Very immediately, what will happen next for IGNITE is, of course, we will be continuing with our What Is series. So we have our next What Is program for What Is Sport presentation. And this will be held on 10th of September at 1800 hours Swiss time. So please do join us then. We also have our next IGNITE conversations that will be coming up quite soon after that, in which we address accessibility, connection, and hope as well. And but as for the future of IGNITE itself, we are hoping to continue growing together as a family. And right now we're working very hard on our educational endeavors that we are implementing. And we are hoping to see in the future that IGNITE can help to positively disrupt some of the processes that we've experienced that are maybe inefficient or that might be harmful in the long run because it puts unnecessary strain, whether on human resources or because we have better solutions available. So hopefully we will become a part of this solution in promoting a culture of cooperation and innovation.
Well, that's great. And what about you? Have you got something planned? I mean, are you going to be taking over a specific role within IGNITEX, or are you heading off to the wilderness again for a bit before the snows come?
IGNITEX. Oh no, but I will be in the wilderness when the snows arrive. I'm excited about
I was sure of that.
But I do always ask myself, at least one night when I'm out in my tent and sort of, not in the night, usually in the morning when I'm waking up and I have to get out of my sleeping bag, I ask myself at least once on wilderness expeditions, what am I doing? Why have I done this to myself again? But as for IGNITEX, my role in IGNITEX, I think I am the idealist and the teller of very bad jokes in the organization. I'm not even the black sheep in our organization, but I'm the wild sheep that sometimes gets stuck on the ledges in the mountains. No, but on a more serious note, I think we are hoping to work on a few projects together with, and also I'm feeling pretty passionate about the education side, because what better way than to keep on learning for the rest of your life than to teach as well. Yeah, so that's at least, I think, something that's close to my heart with regards to IGNITEX.
Okay, well, we will certainly look forward to hearing more about that from you in the near future. So with that, we're going to wind up the showcase. Say thank you very much to everybody for being here today. It was lovely to see messages, Andre, Gustavo, Ming, Ilva, and Mary, and Danielle. Yes. Okay, so this is winding up from us. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for being there, and see you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Ciao.
Well, everyone, thank you again for joining us on the second season of our showcases. During this season, and on the first season as well, we have heard many incredible stories of courage and perseverance, and also just a little touch of madness. The great diversity of journeys and stories that our IGNITEX family have shared remind us that there is no one single path to this world of events and of sport, whether as an administrator or someone working in operations, or perhaps in the field of play as an athlete, a technical official perhaps, or a team official. There are many, many more phenomenal igniters and event professionals out there with stories that will excite and inspire us all. And I really hope that you will join us when we next reconvene for our showcases. Thank you again from Gustavo, Ilva, Neo, and myself, and all the family of Igniters.